good evening, depending on where you're joining from today. This is our weekly live stream about digital transformation. We do this live stream every Tuesday at this exact time on live stream or on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So you can catch us every week at this exact location wherever you're watching from today. Thank you for being here. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and we're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of digital transformation success. And I'm very excited for today's topic, which is unlike any topic we've done before, which is part of why I'm so excited about it, which is when ancient wisdom meets modern digital transformation. So very excited for our guest, who I'll introduce here in just a moment. But before I introduce our guest, a couple of logistical things. First of all, this is a live stream we host every Tuesday. As I mentioned, this live discussion becomes part of our weekly Transformation Ground Control podcast. So if you don't subscribe to that, check that out. We have new podcast episodes that come out every Wednesday that feature these live interviews as well as other content we add to it after the fact. So this discussion will become part of the podcast episode of Transformation Ground Control that gets released a week from tomorrow. So you get to be part of the live podcast production by being here today. So thank you for that. And secondly, speaking of being here as part of our live production, we also try to take as many audience questions as we can. So really appreciate any engagement you might have, or any questions, comments, or anything like that you might have. That is super helpful, and love to get to your questions here as we get started in the conversation. And if you don't mind, speaking of the chat, if you don't mind just dropping in the chat, whichever platform you're listening and watching from here today, if you don't mind just dropping in the chat where in the world you are, what city and country are you in, that helps us just get a feel for who exactly is in the room here today, who exactly is on the stream. So thank you, and curious to see where everyone is joining from today. So what city and country are you all in? I'd love to hear from you. So with all that being said, again, our topic today here is when ancient wisdom meets modern digital transformation. And with us is Judith O'Callaghan. Thank you for being here today, Judith.
Thank you very much, Eric, for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, glad to have you here.
Everyone virtually.
Yeah, a lot of familiar faces on the chat here today, but a lot of new faces as well. And I have to give you particular thanks because I have the benefit of being in London. So in London right now, it's only 3 p.m. You are in Australia, however, and it is not a reasonable time for you right now. It's after midnight. Is that correct?
It's close to midnight, so it's good.
Close to midnight. So thank you for being here late hours your time. Excited to have you on the show. You and I have worked together in the past, and just to set some context here, the reason I wanted to have you on the show, in addition to you being so knowledgeable about digital transformation, business transformation in general, that's how you and I met. I've also noticed in recent months and maybe even years on LinkedIn, I felt we're connected there, and you post a lot about ancient wisdom, and you tie ancient wisdom and quotes back to sort of leadership, business transformation, change, digital transformation, that sort of thing. So I guess before I jump in and talk about some of the thought leadership you put out there, maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your background and how you grew up in the space and all that good stuff.
All right, and thank you. Thank you again, Eric, for this opportunity. So a little bit about me. I grew up in a small place in South India. So it's kind of a melting pot of cultures. And the place has been a place of trading for a very long period of time, like one of the ancient towns where many cultures came in and left their footprint. So as a result of it, I grew up with a lot of wisdoms and sayings from the past, and I've seen a lot of trading families apply that in real life. And like every kid, you take that experience for granted. So when I got into business transformations, I was asking questions myself on where do I get the source of inspiration from. So naturally, you go back to the roots. And with business transformation problems or things that we are trying to find solutions for, I started looking into myself and then the sayings and everything, wisdom that's available around us. So that's where I got into it. And I started writing about it, and I realized it is very powerful. And the information needs to get around. So I started sharing it in the platforms that I know. So I've been finding it very useful and cathartic. And also, whenever there is a opportunity where ancient wisdom can help, it is always there. So
yeah,
that's how I got into it. Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating too because with what you do, it's a good reminder that while some things change a lot, technology and just the world in general is changing so rapidly. When these quotes that you talk about on LinkedIn and in your social media accounts, it's also a reminder that some things don't change, and there's some sort of universal truths and things that can guide us, as we're going through massive amounts of change and whirlwind amounts of transformations and things like that. So I find that super fascinating.
That's very true, right? So when I look at, someone gave me a different perspective on humanity as we talked about ancient wisdom. So the perspective is change has always been there. And yes, we are experiencing a lot of change in the last 10, 20 years, but change as such has been there. And humans, we have evolved over time with technology, adapted, countries came in and technology came in. It's just the type of change that varies. So, but we as human race are very powerful in adapting to that. So some of the lessons are very useful and we all apply it
Right,
knowingly or unknowingly. Yeah.
right. So before we jump into some of these quotes and sort of unpack this concept a little bit more, maybe tell us a little bit about your background in the digital transformation, business transformation space. To maybe just tell us about you and your professional side of you.
All right. So, from a work perspective, after graduation, I was very fortunate to have an opportunity to work in business transformation. One of the very first transformations I got involved was for a sugar company based of nowhere. So, the objective was very simple. How do we help that sugar company, which is literally based in a very tricky town, to be able to sell their product? So that's what got me thinking, and had the privilege of working with all the senior leaders of that organization, and their passion drove me. And I was a young trainee, put in the job. So, and as always, you learn from the environment around you. So I learned it, and the passion of the leaders drove me. And then I got involved in other transformations. I worked, my career took me to the US, to Europe, and now I'm here in Australia. So everywhere else, I'm experiencing very similar things. People with great passion make things happen. And that's very true in our world, especially in the world of digital business transformations. Over the last few years, I've run SAP transformations for a living, and I love it. I love what I do, and I love to see the outcomes that we achieve. And together, we are making a better place. That's what drives me, and that's what keeps me going. So, in whatever shape or form, we are all making the world a better place.
Right. Yeah, and that's what's cool about what you and I both do is that
Yeah, absolutely.
you're helping companies that are also helping other people, whether it's providing sugar to food companies or fulfilling a nutritional need or feeding the world, or every engagement seems to have some sort of greater meaning if you think about it and allow yourself to understand
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So I guess just to start then, how did you sort of answered this a little bit? Maybe
Mhm.
I'll ask it again, and maybe
Yeah.
we could just dive into this a little bit more. But
Yeah.
how did you become interested in making this connection between some of the ancient wisdom and the sayings and the quotes that you grew up with in your
Mm.
current professional career? What made you decide, or what gave you that idea to make that connection, or to start making those connections through some of your thought leadership?
Mm. This is kind of interesting. So when I sit back and look, and like everyone, you go back to the roots for your answers. So this is something I've been subconsciously doing for a long period of time. And last year or year before last, something happened when I started writing for myself and shared it with very close network and colleagues. And one of them said, how about we try sharing it in one of the weekly stand ups or a daily stand up? Because this is very encouraging and it also keeps us grounded. And I started it, and people recorded it and used it for their friends or family, which was good. So the learning for me was ancient wisdom is powerful
Mm,
and we should do something about it. And writing is something I like and it comes naturally to me. So why don't I use it and use the platforms that I have? So I started doing it mainly for myself, just to keep me grounded and keep me focused, and also help me see the big picture in everything I do. And then I started putting that out, and Yeah, now it's a sensation. So last year, I think by Christmas we had about 1 million views. So that's
Mm.
when I was like, yeah, this is powerful. This is beyond me. I need to start sharing a bit more. So yeah, here is where we are in the journey. So we are looking. I've got a newsletter which I publish with OSTTA, so where we put in transformation related topics, and I also have the opportunity to share with you today. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, I'm intrigued by these quotes because I think I was telling you before we started
Mm.
the discussion here live that I have always seen your quotes because you're really good at putting graphics, in your post. So you'll have a graphic with a quote, but then you have some text, and I don't always read the text the way I realized, how much value is in them. And so I went back in preparation for this discussion, and I started reading all the sort of the background and the not the analysis. That it's not an analysis, but it's some of the storytelling that you do behind some of the quotes, and it's really interesting. And I pulled some of my favorite ones, even though it's very difficult to do. I almost got
Oh,
lost in all of the all the content you put out there because you have so much of it on your LinkedIn page. So I picked some of my favorite ones, and I thought we could unpack them here in a minute and talk about what it means or how it ties to the world today or digital transformation, and some of the more interesting ones. And I'd be curious to hear what the audience thinks as well. So be sure to follow Judith. If you don't on LinkedIn, follow her on LinkedIn because you're I think you're probably the person that shows up the most at the top of my feed whenever I get on LinkedIn.
oh, thank
Yep,
you.
when
That's
your
really
post is
kind. So thank
the
you. Yeah.
algorithm seems to know that I like your stuff.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
so what is it? So maybe before we dive into some of these
Mm.
examples of some of your ancient wisdom quotes and the thoughts behind it, why do you think that ancient wisdom can help us with modern digital and business transformations?
So, my take on it is the answer lies in us for most of the circumstances that we do. So, we've been blessed with a lot of change that our ancestors have experienced in the past, and the wisdom is in us and around us, and that's what I genuinely believe in. So, when we look at digital transformation, so yes, it's a new thing. It's been around for the last, let's say, 20, 30 years, where it has accelerated, but change has been there for a very long time. And the concepts of change is very similar. People change, people adopt, and people make everything better. So that's what we are trying to do indirectly or directly in business transformations. If we remove all the nuts and bolts of it, and if we look at the high level, what are we trying to do? Make life simpler, easier, better, and serve our stakeholders better. So that's all it is. So, my relationship to ancient wisdom and business transformation is that pick what's available for us, use the concepts that are available for us because they are tried and tested, and people have lived it to leave a legacy of that quotes or those experiences, and let's make use of them. So, in any circumstance that we can.
Right. Yeah, it's well said, and I totally agree with that way of thinking. I never would have thought to make that connection, but seeing you and hearing you make that connection makes total sense, and I think it's well said. Do you have a favorite? Like, see, you've spent a lot of time thinking about this stuff. You've
Oh.
published a lot. You've written a lot about a bunch of different quotes. Just not just the ones I've seen, and I'm sure there's more that you haven't published yet or haven't put out there yet. Do you have one or two that sort of rise to the surface as one of your favorites?
Yeah. So my grandparents used to tell me everything works out for good. So this happens all the time. Like if I go back with a broken heart or even a scratch on my finger or anything very simple to something very big, the always the first answer that comes from grandparents is everything works out for good. And I just grew up with it. And now I got into positive intelligence, which is another thing that I'm interested in, and I'm learning a bit more about how life works and how our mind works. So, positive intelligence has a concept of viewing everything as a gift. So, they see it as viewing as a gift of opportunity or a gift of knowledge or a gift of inspiration. So, and there is a lot of scientific evidence attached to it. So, when I look back, I go, everything works together for good may seem like a simple quote, but it comes with years and years of wisdom that has been imparted in people in generations. So yeah, embracing things as anything that's happening together for good helps us or empowers us to use that opportunity to do something better. For example, the meeting that didn't go well, uh, a simple example, you go, okay, great. So that's an opportunity. Maybe I gained some knowledge out of it, or maybe I got an inspiration, and I'll turn that into a gift. So when we have that perspective, we know we can turn everything as a gift, and we are not afraid of things going bad, because most people, when I look at it, it's like, well, this cannot fail or that cannot fail, and that's how I was as well. So when I step back and apply the knowledge of ancient wisdom, go, everything can be turned to a gift. Let's put the best foot forward, and it also increases our chance of success. So yeah, it's a
Right.
valuable knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
other one is every information matters, irrespective of who you hear it from and when you hear it from. So my grandfather especially had a habit of receiving all information. So he ran a rubber plantation. So it's a big plantation. So every information, yes, does matter, whether it comes from any source. So he used to keep a book next to him and record everything,
Hmm.
literally anything and everything he hears. And I, I've been watching him, and I asked him, why do you do it? He goes, everything matters. You never know when things are useful. So it could be simple things like the price of rubber or whatever the neighbor sold the rubber for, or to important things like it had records like the rain of the rain levels to various things. But when we look at it in our perspective, it matters. So what we hear on the program matters. What we read matters. So our brain makes a connection to what we hear, to what we read, to what is reported. So in a world of I do program management for a living. So we are driven by information. So there is, yes, information, and information can come from any source, and every piece of information is valued. So it gives us a holistic picture, and then we can work out the next steps.
Right. Right. Those are two really good ones. Just turning to the audience as well, and we already have some feedback from the audience. Shivali on LinkedIn says 1 million views. Wow, that's so awesome, Judith, and that is awesome. They have 1 million views of of that specific content so far. Someone else, I want to point this out here. Oh, Dennis on LinkedIn asked the name of the guest, so I'm just putting your name up here again in case anyone missed it. It's Judith O'Callaghan. Um, and you can find her tagged in the event page here itself, or you can search. You can also search her name on LinkedIn, and you'll find her great content there. I'm actually going to pull up this quote. Is actually one of the ones I was going to ask you about, but Dan on LinkedIn brought it up as well. So maybe we'll start here and just ask. Here's the first of a series of quotes. In addition to the two you just shared, Judith, I'd
Yes.
sort of picked out some of the ones that I liked the most and thought we could talk
Mm.
about those. But Dan brings up one here on LinkedIn. He says some things break our hearts, but fix our vision. I remember seeing that one too, and I thought that one stood out. So
Yes.
what are your thoughts there? Tell us what that means and how it sort of relates to business and leadership and transformation.
Yes, so this is one of my favorites, and this is not my quote as such. And Toby Mac captured it really well in his Speak Life. So when I saw that, I go, "Yep, that captures my heart at that point in time." So mostly when we look at it in life or business or anywhere else, a, a key changing point would have impacted our heart in some ways. So uh, good or bad, that's fine. So it would have impacted in our heart in certain ways. But some of the seemingly bad stuff, when we look at it, that's what gave us the power, or that's what gave us the vision to see things that we haven't seen before. Maybe we took a different perspective, or we just changed the way we did things, or whatever happened. So it's those things that break our heart have the potential to lead us forward. So this quote was very powerful at the time I read it, and the story behind it was uh, very powerful for me. So was anything that breaks the heart, yeah, it may have fixed the vision. Yes, it is hard and it's a heartbreak, but fixing the vision is a priceless gift that one can ever have. So it just sets everyone up for success once we know where we are going and our vision is clear. So that's uh, that's the flip side of that thing. Like, yeah, it is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. Who says no to a good vision, right? So that's what we all aim for. Yeah,
Right, right. Well said.
yeah,
How about this one? One grain of rice may tip the scale. This is one that I saw on your LinkedIn page as well.
yeah.
Tell us a little bit about this one.
So this one is quite interesting. Again, growing up, come from a place which is which is all about eating rice. So a lot of rice quotes are quite popular. And this one, everyone used to say that it's one thing that may tip the scale. So traders normally used rice as a grain of trade for many things.
Mm,
So when we actually weigh rice, I've seen it happen. So you put uh, rice in a balance, and it's only one grain that'll actually tip the balance and make it higher.
mm,
It's a physical quotation. So we may think a grain of rice doesn't have a lot of weight to it, but when we put it on a balance and see the practicalities of weighing a grain, uh, yes, it does have a big play. So things that I heard about this while growing up, or how the saying is applied, is they always talk about it in context of relationships. So you keep investing on relationships, and it's only one thing that you do that will make someone your best friend, or in terms of business, a lifetime partner. So you keep trading with the family or families. So most South Indian families have traded for a very long time. But when we go back in the history and look at it, it's one thing somebody did for someone, would have tipped the scale, established a long-term relationship, and that continues for ages. So they may not be written contracts, but it's the contracts made from heart. So they're much stronger, so they continue. So I apply this in my world in different ways. So I continue investing on stakeholder relationships or vendor relationships or anything, and also being human and being available for people. So most of the relationships that I have developed over time in our industry is because of that genuine investment in time and people we care about, and also doing the right thing. And that's the grain of rice, or that's the currency of trade. Do the right thing, care for people, and always be there. You never know what tips the scale.
yeah, yeah. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a whole book just on the tipping point and just how ideas and concepts and sociological trends,
Yeah,
how they how they just that little minute push over the edge can create that tipping point. And I think a lot of times in digital transformations, business transformations, the same is true. You know, it's a lot of times the minute details, the one grain of rice, you know, sometimes it pushes it one direction or the other, you know, into success or
exactly.
failure or somewhere in between. So I think
Yeah.
it's really good quote. One of the ones I really liked, and especially because you had a story. Um, I believe it was. I believe you were talking a biblical quote from the
Mm,
Bible
okay.
about David. If I'm
Yes.
remember correctly, I don't even
Yeah.
try to paraphrase
Mm,
it for you. I'll let you describe it rather than me trying to remember what you
yeah.
said in the post. But recruiting from the pit, that wasn't the exact
Yeah.
quote, I don't think. But you talk about recruiting from the pit, and I love this quote because it's. I believe I never
Yeah.
frame it this way, but this is how I recruit for our team and how I built the
Mhm.
team third stage in many ways. But I'd love to hear, you know, kind of your thoughts behind this, the story behind it, and what this quote means.
So yeah, this is a powerful thing, and I try to apply the knowledge of what I gathered here in different ways. So one of the things my grandfather used to say, or I used to sit with him as a child in the interviews or when he hires anyone. So it's always about, he talks about the challenges the person had. He never talked about the achievements or the laurels or anything that the person had. So I used to look at it like, when I attended interviews, it was as an adult, it is about, tell me the things that you have done, and what can you do for us. So when people ask about what you've done in the past, it's pretty much asking, what can you do for us. So it's the indirect reason behind the ask. So And then I compared my grandfather's strategies. Why is he always talking about the failures? He all asks about the heartbreak and betrayals and all the other things that people don't necessarily ask about in the interviews. You try and keep it positive. So, and then I came across David's story. David's a very powerful character because I like David's character because his he his lifetime or his reign during the biblical times have had the most transformations. So a country was just being born under a king, and then he comes in and takes over the kingdom, or he's been inherited the kingdom, and then he has to work on stabilizing the kingdom. And when he left it or handed it over to his the people after him, the country was in a beautiful state. It had finances, it had everything that is needed. So when I look at David, is an amazing transformation leader for me. I get a lot of inspiration from him. So one of the things I started doing was analyzing the army or analyzing how he built the team. So I think I forgot the chapter where it was. It was First Samuel 23 or something. So you might know it better than I do, Eric. So where it talks about anyone that is broken, disheartened. It wasn't a perfect army like wherein someone had so many stars or something. The qualification for the army was someone with a heavy heart, someone who has fought the war, or fought the battle, someone who has the scars to show. What a great thing! Like with this, where else can you get the experience? So when I apply it in my world or our world of digital transformation, you go, let's talk about where people have had their hearts broken, or it's the vulnerabilities that make us stronger. So, and
Right.
together we can leave a legacy. So that's how I interpreted it. And for me, that recruiting from the pit, the concept spoke to me dearly. So,
Yeah, and you go on to talk about how it's about recruiting from the pit, not recruiting from the pedestal, I think is what you said
yes,
too. It's
exactly.
And
Yeah.
I think you relate that to, building a team or a high performing team, whether it's for a transformation or an IT department or any
Mm.
other function in a business. It's easy to go out and hire someone who on paper looks super qualified and has a great history and a great background. And that's important. I don't want to
That's
be dismissive of
important.
that,
Yeah.
but you also want to get into the character of the people that you're hiring. And two, are they hungry? Do they have something to prove? Are they going to want to collaborate with people because they like helping people, or, you just getting into the
Yeah.
psyche and the
Mm.
backgrounds of people. Um, I had a,
Absolutely.
I have a friend who is also he's a high up executive at a large financial services company, and he's a big culture guy. So when he hires his team, it's all about culture. He doesn't care as much about college degrees. I mean, you have to have education and a
Mm.
minimum level of knowledge, of course, but
Yeah.
his biggest thing is culture. And so I was asking him one day at a social outing. I was saying, well, how do you get to the bottom of culture, and how do you handle that recruiting piece of it? And it's really interesting because he said, I don't ask about their professional background. And I said, well, what do you ask about then if you're not asking about their professional background? He said, I ask about their upbringing. I ask about their childhood.
Mm.
I ask about their parents. I ask about what they did in school, what they did after school, what they did for fun. And he said, it just tells you so much about the person and who they are and what makes them tick and what motivates them and all that sort of stuff. And it also gives you a good indication of whether or not they're a good cultural fit. So that's sort of what came back to me when I read your story in your post about recruiting
Yeah.
for the fit, because it's sort of like you're not necessarily it's different. It's quite different from it's or it might be easy to misinterpret that to think, well, are you
Yes.
scraping the bottom of the barrel? Is that what you mean? And it's not lesser
No, it's
qualified
not.
people.
Yeah.
It's you're recruiting people that are have aspirations, and they have a lot of
Yeah.
character. Is my interpretation of that quote.
Yeah. Exactly. And you're
Yeah.
you're looking for someone who'll be there for the other person when it matters most. That's what it's all about, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah, and here's an interesting follow-up here from Laik
yeah.
on LinkedIn, who says there's always ease and success after failure. So
Oh,
it's
that's very true. Yeah, absolutely. So it's the failure which becomes the foundation for success, right? So yeah, we can all talk about our success, but we don't necessarily talk about our failures. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's not always as fun or as comfortable to talk about failure as it is to
Oh
talk
yeah.
about success, but there's arguably a lot more lessons from those failures than there are from the
Yes.
successes, I would
Mm.
I would say. How about this one? Here's another one that stood out to me, which is a rock gives way to the tree root, while it does not budge for an axe. I thought that was really
Yes.
interesting.
So, yeah, first time I was told, I heard this, I think I was 8 years old. So I was trying to have a very hard time negotiating something. And
With your parents?
this was the, uh, yeah, and this was from my mom or dad at that time and said, well, look at the tree root. It always wins over the rock. And that saying was interpreted in different ways. So, and and the class teacher told me the same thing the following day. And I go, okay, how did it all happen? And they explained the story behind it. The region where I grew up had a lot of granite rocks, and ancestors tried whatever they could to make it suitable for agriculture. So naturally, you take a hammer and break the rock. And as a result, a lot of them lost a lot of hammers and a lot of tools. And some person along the line decided to plant figs, and figs took root and broke the rocks and also created an ecosystem where things can flourish, like because figs are quite big, so you can plant under it and things can grow, and also birds can stay in the trees and stuff. So the moral of the whole saying is that look for a smoother, easier way because it gives you an outcome in the long run. Though it may be harder, you're getting a more sustainable outcome. So the I've heard another version of it, which is like better to be in peace than being right because peace is better for business. So
Mm,
we tend to get caught on being right, especially in the digital transformation world where everyone, fights about being right. But
right.
that's okay. There is also a lot of value in choosing to be peaceful because peaceful people are likely to get more business. So you don't have to be right all the time, or you don't have to state that you're right all the time. Same as, try the fig tree approach, where we know the rock will eventually give way and you'll get a more sustainable result. You can still use the hammer and all the other tools, but that's just another option if we have the time and patience.
Right. Right. Yeah. And
Mm,
it's, you talk when you think about organizational change
mm,
too, you think about changing people, changing behavior, and getting people to buy into changes within a transformation. You could take the axe approach where you're trying to force it and you're trying to
yeah,
force people to change, or you could take the tree root approach where you're sort of finessing people the direction you want them to go or the direction the organization needs to go. And I think a lot of times executives forget that because they think the axe is, they can use an axe because they're
oh
executives.
yeah.
They just can. So, so they think, well, we might as well use an axe. So I think it's a good
Access, yeah, and it's also accessible and it's a tool of choice, right? So you increase your chance of success and you can see it during your lifetime. But with the tree root, you need patience, you need to grow. So yeah,
yeah, but it's arguably more
mm.
sustained
Oh
growth
yeah,
and more,
sustainable. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Let's see. Here's another one. How we walk with the
All right.
broken speaks louder than how we sit with the great. Tell us about that one.
Yes. So this one again was from David. So King David, when I read his life. So he spent most of his time with the troops, his soldiers. Excuse me. So his team was interesting. So as a result, he had to spend a lot of time with his troops, developing them, growing them, and all that good things that we normally do as leaders. What amazed me was that he could have flipped and spent a lot more time with uh, with other kings or other nations, but then he chose to develop the team, and he did it with most genuine ways of working. So this helped him develop a better nation. So when we translate it now, it is the broken who actually need the attention, whoever it is, and how we navigate that situation makes us who we are, and we make us we we grow in that process, and we are better people as a result of how we sit with the broken. And you can always sit with the great, and then it's very easy to go to the pub or a nice restaurant to have dinner, and it's really hard to be with a colleague who has just been through a failure or something. So, but thinking about weighing up who needs us most, it's the other one.
Right.
I'm just going off camera to get some water. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I'll turn to the audience here while you're doing that. Yeah, that's it. Those are great points there. And here's a really interesting comment from Kyler on LinkedIn. And Kyler says, I asked ChatGPT for the best quote around business transformation. And the response she got was, the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence itself, but to act with yesterday's logic. That was from Peter Drucker. So I guess you could call it relatively ancient, but not ancient in the way Judith is describing some of the quotes that she's been using here. But Peter Drucker is from the last few decades, has been putting out a lot of great thought leadership and management guru type of stuff. So that's another good quote. And I'd be curious to hear from the audience too. What are some of your favorite quotes, whether it's ancient wisdom or just other, leadership, motivational business gurus? Love to hear any feedback you have there. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that last one, or if you heard that, Judith. Not quite ancient wisdom in the way you typically discuss, but a traditional or a classic quote, I guess I would call it, from Peter Drucker.
Everyone knows him, right? Yeah. So yeah. It's I do love him. Yeah. And there is a reason why he's a guru in management, right? Everybody would have read him. We all would have read him in our MBAs. So yeah. He's definitely one of the favorites. And some of the things that he has put forward in his book, we may be able to relate directly to ancient wisdom, and some of it, yeah.
Right.
I did find him very powerful, Peter Drucker. Yeah.
Yeah, he's good for sure. How about this is a good question from Kyle. What is your favorite source of? I know a lot of you quote a lot from the Bible and others, but what are your favorite source or sources for some of these quotes that you write about?
So this is interesting, right? So yes, my roots and I read the Bible and I'm a firm believer in it. So yeah, Bible is definitely my source, and that's where my inspiration comes from. And I also have other sources, and most importantly, the source of heart. So the heart knows what it wants, and it always gets what it wants, and it gets this information from the past and the present, and some elders believe it's from the future as well. So as long as we are guided by our heart, we are okay. So in life or work, so yeah, two main sources, and also guidance from above.
Right, absolutely. Here's another quote from Laik. I'm not sure who the quote is from, but people's deeds are a mirror to the leader. The state of the people is a reflection of the state of the leader. What are your thoughts?
This is very powerful, isn't it? And positive intelligence talks about mirror neurons and everything, and leader seem to have a lot of influence. That is leaders have 3 times more influence than a peer. So if a leader is positive, we are likely to be more positive. So there you go. Leaders do matter, and we've been blessed, so that's good.
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds simple enough, but so many leaders fail to recognize that, or they don't fully understand the power that they have sometimes. So I think it's a good point.
And it's a responsibility as well, right? So as leaders, we have a responsibility towards our team to be positive and guide. So that's our first.
Yeah. So I want to come back to one. This is actually the first one I was going to ask you, but I ended up going down the list and covering some other ones first. But here's another one that I pulled from your LinkedIn postings in your newsletter, and that is, let's respond with grace even when others don't. What are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a powerful one for me. So we are taught to, like, how do I say this? We naturally react to things and not respond to things. So, and it's a conscious choice to respond. So when we respond as well, we have a choice to respond in different ways. So choosing to respond with grace is a conscious choice, and not everyone does it. So especially in tough times, you know, we have the right thing to do, the kind thing to do. So am I responding with the kind thing to do with grace? And am I delivering the same information with grace? So that's the questions that I asked myself. And I have this in my office and I have it printed everywhere because it's a very powerful reminder, so that it is for us leaders to set the example, to choose to respond with grace, even if others don't. So, and the second part is it gets harder when, especially when you're in a heated debate, or forcing an idea, or whatever it is, right, in the world of transformation that we do. So it's about responding with grace. That that makes everything smoother, easier, better for us, not necessarily for the other person. But we know we have chosen to respond to that situation, or that whatever it is, with grace, and it makes us better people every day.
Right, right. Now, here's a question from the audience
Yeah.
on LinkedIn that I
Mhm.
think maybe ties some of these ancient wisdom quotes,
Mhm.
sort of brings us back to the future or back to the present, however you want to frame it. But this is from Rushi on LinkedIn. Rushi says, "What, according to you, is the relevance of a newly thrown around term called MTP, massive transformative purpose?" I have not heard this acronym, so I'm not familiar with it. I don't know if you've heard it or if you
Yeah.
have any interpretation of this phrase.
This is a very new concept to me as well. So, uh, you know, all I have is a very big, very simple Google knowledge. We
Right.
do have a purpose everyone is driven to. So, my take on it is everyone needs a tribe and a purpose. So, this is a blessing that's normally given to someone who hits puberty. So, may you find your tribe, may you find your purpose. So, it comes down to those two things. And yes, purpose is a big thing. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I'm not very familiar with the whole concepts or the depths of it. So,
Yeah. It just sounds like something, even though it's a newer buzzword, it sounds like something
yeah.
with that focus on purpose. It sounds like something that, you might see or relate
Mm.
to some of these ancient quotes and ancient wisdom that you write about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting. Um, so what other so those are sort of the
Mhm.
5 or 7 quotes that I had pulled out from your LinkedIn page. Are there other ones
Mm.
that you think are really worthy of keeping at the forefront of our minds when it comes to leading a transformation or being part of a transformation? Do any others
Mhm.
sort of bubble to the surface as ones that you think we should talk about?
So I like the character Abigail, who is the kind of the second line leader during King David's times. She's what she's his wife, and also played a very big part in the leadership. So what I really like about that style of leadership is it was always working around the constraints. So working around the constraints is more powerful than working through the constraints when we translate it that way. And it's translated from my native language, but not necessarily. I'm not using a word by word translation, but the summary is, yeah, working around the constraints is always better, because constraints are going to be there in some shapes or forms and all of that, and we may not be able to remove all the constraints. So there are things that could be non-negotiables that we may not be able to remove. So adopting a mindset of what constraints that we can work around enables us to get things smoother and easier and better. And also, better, sorry, bigger is not necessarily better. So
Mm,
being purpose built is gets you far better, far further than anything that you can think of. And my favorite one is, we go further by walking together.
mm,
And our strength lies in our differences and not in our similarities. So this is an ancient Indian quote, and it's two phases. Our strength lies in our differences and not in our similarities. And it's elders who know the way, and the youth can walk faster.
mm. Yeah, that's interesting. And so many of these quotes that you've talked about are things that can be related to any sort of project team building and leadership and digital transformation, business transformation, and all that good stuff. Certainly change management. I feel like a lot of the quotes we've been talking about are relative to how you lead change and how you manage change and how you collaborate as a team. And really, that's what these business and digital transformations are all about. So it's very interesting. So, are there any upcoming quotes that you are about to post on LinkedIn or write about that you could share with us, or ones that you haven't published yet? I'm just curious if you have kind of a queue or a backlog of
Yeah.
quotes that you want to write about.
So most of my writing is done well in advance, in the sense, I should say almost a year in advance at the moment. So, and that's how far we go. My next one that I'm looking to publish is on the elders know the way the youth can walk fast. So it's about a story on what we can do by taking time to understand the way, and then it enables us to walk faster. So
Uh,
so that's something that I'm looking to publish. I'm shaping that up at the moment. So
Interesting.
it's yeah, it's about a conscious pause to understand the way, so we can walk faster.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
speaking of elders, I don't know if this helps you
Mm.
in your writing or not, but I feel like it relates to this discussion. But it just coincidentally, before we started this discussion, I was going back through. I read all the comments
Mm.
I get on LinkedIn and also on YouTube. And on one of my YouTube videos that I just published yesterday, it's gone somewhat viral. And I was reading the
Oh,
comments
nice.
on there. And one of the comments, yeah, I was talking about why digital transformations are failing at an
Mm.
increasing rate. That's what the premise of the video is. And one of the comments here, unrelated to this live discussion, but I feel
Mm.
like it is related. But they didn't post it in this discussion.
Mm.
But they said this is from someone named Seth on YouTube, and Seth said the Boomer generation is retiring en masse and not passing on their expertise through digital transformations. Gen X and millennials need to do a better job capturing this expertise before it's too late. So
That's
again,
very
totally
true.
unrelated to this conversation,
Yeah,
directly unrelated, but it's very related. I mean,
that's
it's what
very true,
we're
right?
talking about with the
Yeah. We definitely have a huge population who's retiring in the next X number of years, and we need to invest time and energy to capture their knowledge, because once they retire, we are starting from the scratch. That knowledge would leave us. So, yeah, elders definitely know the way. So,
right,
yeah, we
right.
take time to capture them. Yeah,
Yeah, and
and the other,
you
yeah,
forget that sometimes because technology. Sometimes you think
mm,
technology is a young man or woman's game,
yeah,
and older people don't know as much about technology, or that's sort of a stereotype, an
yeah,
inaccurate stereotype. But I think a lot of times we forget, to your point, that the elders have this wisdom, that years and
absolutely,
years of experience, decades of experience. That how can we leverage some of that? And that's exactly why we're chatting about it here today.
absolutely, yeah. And the other one is always we look to leave a legacy. So everyone, whether we choose or not, we leave a legacy and let it be a good one. So
Right,
we have the choice and we can make it powerful and
right,
rewrite our story. Yeah.
right. So I guess just to sort of wrap this all together, in sort of thinking about how we move forward with our change initiatives, our business transformations, our digital transformations, whatever role we might have on those. What closing ancient wisdom or advice would you leave with someone who's about to begin a digital transformation journey? Is there sort of one quote or a couple different quotes that you think are sort of encapsulates what you need to know or the way you should be thinking as you go through a transformation within a business?
So my take on it is what the quotes that have been handed over to me, which is every information matters,
Mm,
even if it is from a very small source. Every information matters, and value it. The other one is everything works out together for good. So as we embark on transformations, not everything is going to be positive, and success is not going to be a story from day one. So it's a series of small failures that'll eventually stack success. So embrace everything, celebrate everything, because it's leading all of us into something very beautiful. So
Mm.
that's my take on it.
Yeah, and I think it's also it's a good quote for just the value of listening. I mean, when you're going through a transformation, it's easy to focus on the future state and the vision and the way things could be, and it's oftentimes easy to be dismissive or to maybe be flippant about the way things are, the way things were in the past, and you don't want to get too caught up in the past. But there's value in listening and understanding, what people like about the current state or what challenges they're going through as part of the current transition or the transformation. So there's just a lot of I think focusing on the listening aspect is really important, especially if you're a leader or a consultant. I feel like those are the two roles where you need it the most. You need that listening acumen to be able
Yes.
to do what your grandfather did or told you to do, which
Yeah.
is to listen. Listen there. And to say the quote one more time: every information is
Every information matters. Yeah.
every information matters. Yeah, it's a great point.
Every information.
Yeah, so that's a good one. So what are your plans for these quotes? Do you plan to consolidate all this into a book, or do you obviously you're going to continue? It seems like you're going to continue writing these newsletters and that sort of thing. But what is your future in terms of
Yeah.
taking these quotes and these lessons?
So definitely continue writing, and the book is coming along, and I'm hoping it'll be ready by end of the year. So it is definitely
Nice.
on this topic and how we can embrace it. And the other one is we are looking at a podcast. So I'm sure Eric, you and I will have more conversations there. So good things coming our way. Yeah.
That's great. That's very cool. It's cool how you've carved out this niche. Sort of a very unique niche in a ever changing technological landscape. It's really cool to see what you're doing here. So what are the best ways for people to follow you? Is it LinkedIn? Are there other ways for
Yeah.
people to get a hold of you? How can we connect with you?
So LinkedIn is my favorite social media of choice at the moment. So I post mostly there. So follow me there, and I'll have the link for my other publications in LinkedIn, so you can connect if anyone's interested. You can connect and read them there.
Very good. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Judith. Really appreciate it,
Thank you.
and
My
especially given
pleasure.
how. Yeah, it's a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and especially appreciate
Thank,
you staying so late till after midnight your time. So I appreciate you doing that for the audience here today.
thank you.
And
Pleasure is mine, and thank you very much for having me, Eric. Thank you.
absolutely, absolutely, and thank you to the audience too. Thank you for all the great questions for Judith here, and be sure to connect with her. Her posts really are super interesting, so I highly encourage you to check it out. It's a very thought-provoking post that she has, and be sure don't do what I did at first, which is just look at the graphic because she always has a really nice graphic to go with her post, but read the post because she always has a really good story behind it and some additional context, and I missed that at first. So if it wasn't for this interview, it might have taken me even longer to figure out that you have a whole lot of substance behind the graphic in the quote itself. There's a whole story behind it. So I encourage you to follow her and check out those quotes. So thank you to the audience for the great questions. Be sure to check out this live interview. Will become part of our Transformation Ground Control podcast that gets released a week from tomorrow, Wednesday of next week. And we do these live conversations, these live podcast productions every Tuesday. So be sure to check us out. Same time, same place. Thank you all for being here. I hope you have a great week, and we will see you next time. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Judith. Bye.
Bye.